Ready for takeoff. Welcome. I invite you to come along with me on a rescue mission. We're going to navigate the struggle, and our final destination is where all students will be successful readers by the end of third grade. As you can see by the quote at the bottom, students who are not reading at grade level by third grade begin having difficulty comprehending the written material that is a central part of the educational process in the grades that follow. In the Apollo 13 movie that was aired in 1995, it depicts a mission that was researched, planned, and simulated years before the actual launch. Still, when the mission failed, there was an urgency to rethink things in order to save those astronauts and aboard that spacecraft. The astronauts, flight director, NASA, and mission control had to navigate that struggle. As educators, we have a research plan in place also to lead our students to being successful readers. However, when we have students who fall off that trajectory, we need a plan. We must also navigate the struggle. The theme of Apollo 13 was overcoming challenges. The pictures on this screen show the key players in the Apollo 13 mission as depicted in the film. We're going to connect our mission to theirs as we create a plan to reach our final destination. So there's an importance of early intervention. There is an urgency because after third grade, the mission of reading changes. It's no longer learning to read, but it changes to reading to learn. We can't wait to identify difficulties in third grade. We must begin remediation at the very first sign of a problem. In Apollo 13, the astronauts saw gas leaking out the window of their spacecraft, and knew they had to act now. If they had dismissed it and waited to see if it went away, they would have ran out of time in order for someone to be able to intervene and get them home. Likewise, we must act as soon as we see the beginning symptoms of a struggling reader. We must put an intervention in place so that we can get them where they need to be. Early intervention can make a significant difference in developing strong literacy skills. We can help children overcome their challenges and catch up with their peers. Collaborating with specialists such as speech and language pathologists or reading specialists can provide valuable insights and strategies for individualized instruction. Many studies have been done that show the significance of early intervention on long-term success. We have numerous case studies right here in our school building of students who have benefited from reading recovery, and they no longer needed any kind of intervention beyond third grade. Our first step is to identify those struggling readers. So we need to be alert to those common signs of a struggling reader. We need to notice if there's phonemic and phonological awareness. Are they having difficulty decoding? Is there a lack of fluency? Are they lacking vocabulary knowledge? Or is comprehension a struggle? After identifying the problem, we need to build a supportive team. Once students are identified, we need to call in a whole school approach to getting them back on track. We have to take a look outside of our classroom and our grade level colleagues for other options. Things on the spacecraft of Apollo 13 were all designed for a very specific purpose. Likewise, our Tier 1 instruction is also designed to teach children to read. However, when those things that we have in place are not working, we must look for alternatives. Jim Lovell had to look to mission control. As classroom teachers, we need to look to Title I and interventionist, or AEA and special education services. And certainly we need to look at families. They are a part of the support team. In the movie, the beginning of the rescue mission was when Jim Lovell reported, "Houston, we have a problem." And that should be our reaction as well when we see those first symptoms. We need to identify we have a problem so that we can begin getting things in place to save the mission. Differentiated instruction is probably our um, greatest method that we can use in order to help our struggling readers. Differentiated instruction allows all students to access the same classroom curriculum by providing entry points, learning tasks, and outcomes that are tailored to students' needs. When struggling readers are off of the trajectory of being a successful reader, they become like a square peg that's trying to be fit into a square hole. No, a square peg that's being fit into a round hole. Um, it's not working. What works for everyone else is not working for that student. As Gene Kranz said in the movie, I don't care what it's designed to do. Let's think about what it can do. So, our differentiated instruction means we need to tailor our instruction to the specific needs of the struggling readers, whether that be they need phonics instruction or fluency or intensive vocabulary development or working on comprehension strategies. We need to have flexible small groups so that students are getting what they need when they need it, but they're not stuck in that same place. So when their needs change, their small group changes. We need to use tier 2 intervention. That is also differentiated instruction. That's when we bring in our reading specialist, and they also meet with students to give them exactly what they need. Another fun way to do differentiated instruction is through centers, and that can work to target students' interests, their learning styles, and their needs. Um, my small groups are meet every day, and some are working on phonics. That is the area where they need the most help. Some are working on um, comprehension, some are working on fluency. The schedule of my reading block is that we do large group phonics, and then we move to small groups where I can specifically give students exactly what they need when they are at my table. Then we meet again for large group comprehension with vocabulary instruction, and then again we meet in small groups so that I can do that same instruction more tailored to the needs of the students. We need to plan for a school-wide approach where all classrooms will provide small group instruction tailored to meet the needs identified by observations and assessments. The first area that we might need to tackle with a struggling reader is through phonics and word recognition. And the components of this area of reading is in students' phonemic awareness, their phonological awareness, phonics, and sight word recognition. They need those necessary foundational skills for success in fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So, when phonics and word recognition is solid, it frees up the student to be able to concentrate on reading for meaning, which is what we're preparing them to do the most of in third grade. Some of the interventions that we can use in building that phonics and word recognition is through making words, breaking words, using sound boxes, analogy charts, and games. Students, especially in the early grades, love games and don't even realize that they may be working on phonics and word recognition because they get caught up in the game that they're playing. It's a great way to engage kids in practicing what they need most. Um, on a weekly basis, I tailor my guided reading groups word work specific to their needs. For example, in large group instruction this week, we're working on contractions and we're working on the phonics skills of soft C and soft G. However, when I'm meeting with my small groups this week, I have one group that's just beginning to work with consonant blends. I have another group that's working on ending blends, and yet another is still is moving on to long vowel patterns. So they get exposure in the large group, but then we really concentrate on what they need in their small group instruction. The second area that we need to look at is in vocabulary development. So there is an urgency of vocabulary because it is one of the greatest predictors of school success. I found this quote interesting that the degrees of knowing a word are reflected in the precision with which we use a word. how quickly we understand a word and how well we understand and use words in different modes. Some interventions that we can use in building vocabulary development is through choosing words, using student-friendly definitions, through a rich and varied language experiences, and through small group instruction. Choosing words is just choosing 3 to 5 words in each content area that we can concentrate on during the week. I might choose 2 to 3 words in science that are migrate and life cycle, or maybe even in math, add and subtract, and greater than and less than. And then words that are specific to the books that we're reading that week. Student-friendly definitions are just ones that students can link to their prior knowledge. I try to put the words in context that students are familiar with, and then I give them an example of that word as far as it applies to me. Then I encourage them to think of a time that they can relate to the new word and share it with a partner. And then finally, I bring it back to the context in which we are going to hear and see the word. Rich and varied language experiences. That I do this during our large group comprehension time. So I will present the vocabulary. I'll give them a definition. I'll have them try to interact with the word in some way, either by a facial expression or maybe an action. And then I have them listen for those words as I'm reading the text and have them give me some kind of a symbol when they recognize that word in the text. And then again, I can't stress the importance of small group instruction because you can tailor that the needs of each individual student in that small group instruction. So in small group, you might target 2 kinds of vocabulary words. It's important that you pinpoint the words in the books that they are going to be reading that might be necessary for comprehension. And then also in the high frequency words that you are teaching, along with their word study, to make sure that they know what those words mean. Again, vocabulary development is significant because it is essential for the comprehension. If students aren't able to understand the words that are in the story, it's going to greatly impede their comprehension. Fluency is another component that students can often struggle with. I've given a definition of fluency through an acrostic poem that I will let you read through. The most important thing to remember is that fluency is not reading fast. It is actually reading for meaning, using expression and phrasing so that they can construct meaning as they read. Some interventions that I've listed here are, again, intensive reading remediation with phonics, word recognition, and vocabulary. Often those are what impedes fluency if they are stuck on the sounds that letters make or letter combinations, or maybe they get stuck on a word that's not familiar to them, so it slows down their fluency. Another good strategy is to use repeated readings. Um, these are often done in small groups again with texts that are just below students' instructional level. By giving them repeated practice, they no longer have to concentrate at all on the word recognition. They can concentrate on how to make it sound fluent and how to read it in a way that will help them to make meaning out of it. And finally, performance reading is a fun way to engage kids in practicing their fluency through readers' theater or doing plays where they actually get to perform and become a different character so they don't realize they're even practicing that fluency in strategies. And then finally is comprehension. Comprehension is actually the heart and soul of the reading process. It's when the reader uses deliberate thinking processes to get meaning from the text. This is a big one because this is exactly what we were talking about. They're going to need to be doing when they get to 3rd grade, where comprehension is really going to become a significant part of their reading. So, some interventions to build comprehension is through building background knowledge, text features, using graphic organizers, and then explicitly teaching visualization, predictions, questioning, summarizing, all strategies that can aid in comprehension. By having the phonics and the word recognition and vocabulary and fluency proficiencies, that will free up students' thinking to focus on the meaning of the text. So that's why those 3 components are essential to have before worrying about the struggles with comprehension. Since this is what we're preparing them for, we need to make sure those foundational skills are there. Again, it needs to be differentiated. In the beginning, they're simply doing recall of the stories that they're reading. And then that leads us into higher order thinking questions. Um, Teachers must create environments that value reading with a wide variety of text and time for teacher read alouds and reading independently. Um, Again, in large group in my classroom, we choose a strategy and highlight it for the week in different text. And then we affirm that same strategy in their small group instruction with me. In my differentiated small groups, I emphasize self monitoring so they know whether they are understanding the story using strategies like STP, where they stop, think, and put it into their own words. We talk about identifying key words to help them, um, using retell strategies like beginning, middle, end. And then we move into tracking character feelings and even identifying character traits. We need to utilize the interventionists and our specialized support. So back to the Apollo 13 movie, the three astronauts, Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Jack Swigert, were just like us classroom teachers. They all had varied experience, from the veteran teacher to the first year. Ken Mattingly was an astronaut that who had the same exact training as the ones that were in space. He had been in the trenches. He knew exactly what had gone into the training. He is like our Title I teachers, our reading interventionists. They know the process. They know where the breakdowns can happen. Gene Kranz was the flight director, and he had to keep using the data collected from the astronauts. He was the one to aid in the communication between all the different moving parts. So that's like our building principles. They have to facilitate all that goes into a comprehensive intervention. And then mission control is like our AEA, or our special education team. They have the specialists to focus on very specific components. So when teachers and schools' original plans aren't working for a student, the specialists are called in for monitoring and brainstorming. I have included some ways that we can use technology to enhance students' literacy skills. And we know that kids these days are engaged or motivated by technology and the devices, um, and the apps that we can find. So I've included some apps that work for the different components of literacy, and also just why those technology apps work. When we identify students that are struggling, one very important component is to continue to progress monitor. So Gene Kranz and Mission Control kept using data collected from the astronauts to monitor how they were doing. Based on those assessments, decisions were made and interventions were adjusted. Likewise, we must continue to frequently monitor our struggling readers and to make informed decisions and adjust our interventions. What works one day may not work the next day. We may get one issue resolved, and there may be something else that we need to focus on. So we need to be continuing to monitor their progress. And finally, we need to instill a growth mindset into our students. The definition of growth mindset is that dedication and hard work can make anything possible. We want to encourage our students to embrace challenges, to persevere, to be inspired by others, and to see effort as a path to success. In Apollo 13, it took perseverance. They lost part of their spacecraft. They lost oxygen. They had to shut everything down, so they lost their water and their power, even the control of the spacecraft. They were running out of breathable air, yet they didn't have a choice but to persevere. So we need to teach our kids, I can do hard things, and we need to teach them the power of yet. You may not be able to do that proficiently, but it just means you can't do it yet. With hard work and practice, you will get there. And then we need to remember the component of parent involvement. Research confirms that home based family involvement is a strong predictor of children's learning outcomes. So, just like the families in Apollo 13, Marilyn Lovell was on the ground feeling helpless, wanting information, needing a plan. Our students parents also need to be informed. We need to keep that flexible communication open. They may want to help and they just don't know how to help. So, some schools send home reading backpacks with different activities that they can do. A child might bring one of those home every other week. And then, in addition, I have included another handout that will help parents in just when they read stories to their kids or when their kids read to them. I've included strategies to help build their comprehension, strategies to help build fluency, so parent questions and parent language, explaining what they can do to interact with their kids when they're reading books, and then even just questions to help when they're decoding words. We can empower parents to be part of the process. We want them to feel a part of that support team. In conclusion, Gene Kranz said it the best. Failure is not an option. We're going to have those kids whose reading plan doesn't follow protocol. There are going to be those that, despite all of the wonderful things we're doing in the classroom, they will still veer off the trajectory of grade level reading. It's then that we have to look outside of our four walls and build a team to support the reader. We must work collaboratively with a problem solving, growth mindset, and by looking into each component of reading, we can pinpoint areas of strength and those with potential breakdown. When we have all the information, we can make plans for differentiated instruction to meet their specific needs. This is a perfect time for us to begin collaboration. Are there any questions or concerns or any discussions we can have to get us started on this mission?